Hey girls and gals, welcome back to the channel. My name is Taylor and I have two dogs. This is an important fact about me because today's vlog is going to be one in which my dogs are choosing my TBR and what books I read. I have done this a couple of times in the past and it's honestly worked out really well. My dogs have great reading taste, both of them, so we're hoping for third time's a charm with this video series, hoping to get some good wins to kick off 2020. I like doing this series when I have a lot of physical books checked out from the library because sometimes I can get overwhelmed by just the sheer size of a physical TBR and I get in like paralysis mode trying to decide which ones to read. So I figure why not let Bruce and Obi do the heavy lifting for me. They are going to pick the reads and I will see if I like them or not. We're gonna go ahead and kick off this vlog. The first dog to choose is always Bruce because seniority first. So let's go ahead and see what Bruce has chosen for us today. So here are our first three selections for Bruce. These are all darker covers and I believe they're all gothic horror as well. So let's see what he chooses. So I'm about 45 to 50% of the way through my Darling Dreadful Thing and I'm really enjoying this one so far. This is gothic horror. I'm absolutely loving the atmosphere. The setting of this one is also like a time and place that I don't think I've ever read from before. We're following the immediate aftermath of World War II, so late 40s, early 50s. It takes place in the Netherlands and our main character, Roos, is a medium. She works with her mother to contact the dead. Now this is a little bit of a ruse because it's a little bit faked. Roos cannot contact all of these spirits of the dearly departed that people want her to contact. She can only contact one spirit and that is her spirit companion Ruth, who came to her when she was a girl and sticks around by her side and is a very interesting spirit. That's the only spirit she can talk to, but Roos and Ruth and then Roos's mother have a business going where Roos has Ruth inhabit her as a spirit and then they pretend to be the other spirits that the people are coming and paying them to visit. So they have this little system going on. Roos does not like her mother. They do not get along. Her mother really uses her as a source of income and does not treat her like a mother should treat her child. And Roos is a very deeply unhappy character at the beginning of this book. However, at one of the seances, a very rich and mysterious widow appears and has Roos contact her husband. However, Roos realizes that this widow, Agnes, knows that she is a fraud and she thinks that Agnes is going to completely disrupt her life and reveal her for a fraud. That is not what happens. Agnes actually hires her to come to her estate and live with her and her sister-in-law and help keep both of them company. It's a very intriguing offer and Roos accepts. It's not a offer that she thought she would ever get and she does not like her home situation. So even though it's a weird, interesting setup, she agrees. She goes. They are spending time at this gothic crumbling estate. It is gothic perfection. The ambiance and the descriptions of the manor and the grounds, I absolutely love it. There are a lot of nods and references to The Turn of the Screw and I really love that. A lot of references to just classic gothic literature and I'm really enjoying that. I'm enjoying the relationship between Roos and Agnes as there's an attraction from the instant these two meet eyes upon each other. They don't know the specifics of that attraction, just they know that they're being pulled towards each other and it's a very strange and compelling way. Perhaps has to deal with some spirit activity that's going on because we do have Ruth. We also discover Agnes has something that is attached to her as well and the manor that these ladies now live at is haunted as well. Not only haunted by the past but potentially haunted by something sinister as well. So really love those gothic elements, and I'm having a really good time with this one. The way that this is set up is also very intriguing because we do have Ruth telling us the story of everything that happened, how she met Agnes, how she went to this estate. We also have some transcripts thrown in at the end of some chapters that signify that something went down. These chapters, these transcripts are in the future. Something horrible happened at the estate. Someone has died and Ruth is being accused of being the murderer. So we kind of have that back and forth, which adds a lot of tension to those gothic chapters because we, the reader, know something is going to happen. Something is inevitably going to happen. Someone is going to get killed, and we're just watching Ruth go through these chapters, get accustomed to this manor, and starts to tentatively enjoy her new life and the new relationships that she has formed. And we, the reader, just know there's something coming that really ups the ante and ups the ambiance and gives the reader a sense of dread because we know something horrible is going to happen. I really am enjoying this one. What a great gothic read. I'm going to go finish this one up and then I'll check back in later and give y'all a final review. Bruce did a great job with his selection. I ended up really loving this one. This author is definitely going on a list of not necessarily my favorite authors yet because this is the first thing that I've read from her, but she's coming out with something else either in February or March. It looks very beautiful as well with the cover. I think it's another historical gothic, and I believe it has to do with vampires. So I'll definitely be checking that out. I absolutely loved this one. If you are a fan of The Haunting of Bly Manor, the Mike Flanagan show, I think you should pick this one up. I thought this was just really beautiful. The gothicness of this worked, the blend between the horror elements because there's some imagery that is very creepy, very sinister and chilling, and then we also have that romance which is so central to gothic literature that just really works in tandem with the high stakes and with the horrific things that are happening. I really liked this story a lot, and I really enjoyed the way in which this was told, where we're getting our main character telling us the story and then it's interspersed with the doctor's notes from in the future, so we kind of know what is happening. We're keeping the tension high and the stakes high in a story that is just a little bit slower with that gothic pacing. I really had fun with this one. It was definitely a decadent gothic time. The imagery, the descriptions of the manor and the main characters and their relationship, and the themes in this one of what it means to be haunted, not just by a spirit companion like Oliver or Ruth, but also what it means to be haunted by horrible things and horrible people that have done horrible things to you in the past. I really loved that exploration, and I really had a fun time with this one. This was such an excellent book to kick off this vlog. I'm kind of bummed that I didn't read it last year a little bit closer to when it had released because I have a feeling this could have like made a place, if not on my top 10 of the year, then in like the honorable mentions, because I loved my journey reading this, and I finished it yesterday, but I have not been able to stop thinking about it since. So I really enjoyed this one. So strong start to the vlog. Good job, Bruce. We are now moving on to Obi's first pick. So this is the next set of 3 books. I am now 50% of the way through The Queen by Nick Cutter, and this book in tone and pace could not be more different than the last book I read. The last book was slow, it was gothic, and this one very fast-paced, very high octane, like a sci-fi horror with a lot of body horror as well. So definitely a different reading experience from Bruce's first book to Obi's first book, but overall I think I'm enjoying this one. I hesitate to say enjoying because there's a lot of really gruesome, horrific body horror in here, but I am very intrigued by this story. I've read a lot from Nick Cutter before, and I've really enjoyed two of them, The Deep and The Troop, and then The Handyman Method I didn't hate. I know that one's not very popular, but I thought it was enjoyable for what it was. It was intentionally hard to read with the main character being very unlikable, but this book, The Queen. First of all, the cover, I really love this one, and it really signifies what you're getting into, particularly with the title, and then we see this little wasp right here. It's got bugs in it. It's got a lot of bugs, so if you have any sort of fear of bugs or creepy crawlies, stay far away. I don't really have like a big fear of bugs, but this has a lot. This has a lot of bug and body horror intertwined, and it's bringing up things I never thought to be grossed out or scared by. So just a heads up, if you're not a bug person, skip this book altogether. But we are following high schooler Margaret or Maggie Carpenter, and at the very beginning of this book, first of all, this book also takes place within 24 hours. It's actually done really effective in this book. It really feels like one jam-packed, action-filled day. If you are trying to do the books in the freezer reading challenge, one of the bonus prompts is read a book that takes place within 24 hours. This would count for that. But we follow Maggie Carpenter at the beginning of this day. She wakes up, goes outside because she has gotten a text saying that there's a package for her at her front door. She goes, gets the package, opens it up. It's a phone with text messages from her best friend to her. Now this is mysterious because her very best friend has gone missing. She's been missing for about a month and presumed dead by everyone closest to her and the community. The police have kind of given up their search, and Margaret has been spending the last month in a depressive haze, never leaving her house and just feeling very isolated and lost without her very best friend Charity. However, these series of texts from Charity soon sent her on a scavenger hunt to find out what happened to her, and having Margaret realize that potentially, even though they've been best friends since they were very little, the kind of friends that tell each other anything, potentially she never knew Charity in the first place. So we're following that. We're following Margaret, and then we're also following this mysterious rich man named Rudyard, and he is in charge of a lot of scientific experiments involving bugs and genetic sequences and humans, and we're going to see how their paths intertwine and how their paths and Charity's paths have intertwined. So this one, very interesting. I will say my least favorite part about this so far is there are a couple scenes where Margaret is at school interacting with other kids, and the way that the children talk to each other feels very much like an older adult wrote this, but the scenes are very few and far between. It's not a lot of pages, so I can ignore that. Those scenes, the school scenes, were not my favorite because they didn't feel very realistic, and of course, you know, I'm almost 30, so I'm not the best expert on how high schoolers talk. Obviously, it's probably pot calling kettle black there to call out this author for maybe not knowing specifically how they talk, but I do have two siblings that are in high school right now, and I do hear their friends and them interact and see how they talk on social media and their presence that way and the way that they use certain slang words. Just some of the things that the teens say to each other sound a little bit like an older person wrote them, but that's honestly okay. There's not too much time spent there, but overall this book is very fast-paced. I actually started it yesterday. I know these vlogs don't have like timestamps or date stamps or anything, but I did start this one yesterday. Flew through the first 50% and I anticipate doing the same with the last 50%. So yeah, I am definitely intrigued to see where this one goes. I'm a little bit horrified at the things that are coming out of these pages, but I am going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I'll check back in with an update. So I ended up finishing The Queen by Nick Cutter, and this one just ended up being okay for me. The things I liked about this one, I liked the fast-paced nature of this book. It takes place within 24 hours, and I do think that it goes like very fast-paced. This is easy to fly through, and I enjoyed the idea behind this one. In a lot of ways, the conceptual premise for this book is the fly, or the metamorphosis, meets Carrie, and those comp titles made me feel like this was going to be a very interesting ride. The body horror, the bug horror, I cannot emphasize enough. If you have a thing for bugs, if you do not like bugs at all, you want to skip this one. The bug horror in this one was a lot, very effective for anyone who is scared of creepy crawlies. Now, the things that I didn't love about this one so much, I didn't love how this was definitely a female protagonist, a young female protagonist in high school, written by an older man. I know in the acknowledgements that Cutter did his research and tried to make it as accurate as possible, but this protagonist just didn't really read like a young woman to me. She didn't really read like someone who was a junior, a senior in high school, and I didn't, the social commentary then about certain things that affect young women in society rang a little false just because of that. There's a lot of wrap up at the end of this book that kind of explains the themes and what this was supposed to be saying, and I felt like it was handled a little bit clumsily. I felt like maybe if we would have leaned less into Carrie and more into the metamorphosis or the fly, then maybe that would have just been a little bit stronger for me. Also, this is not something I've mentioned in this vlog, but I have several different vlogs going at the same time, and I feel like this is kind of something that I've talked about in another vlog recently, and that is my frustration with books that like take too long in an epilogue or take too long to exactly wrap everything up in a neat and tidy bow. And this book definitely fell victim to that. So this book is split up into multiple parts, and the last part in this book is called Ever After, and it essentially acts as one big epilogue, and I didn't love it. I thought it could have ended after the part before it. The story ends really effectively on page 329, and then you're like, okay, this story's done. What's next? Is it the acknowledgements? What is it? No, it's another part of the story, and a large part of that story is told in a fictionalized article for a newspaper, and that is a fun little Easter egg because we find out it's the same reporter that has reported coverage on the events that have happened in the troop and Little Heaven, and that's intriguing, and that could have worked for an epilogue, but this article is about 20 to 30 pages, and it wraps up, like, it goes over a synopsis of everything that happened in the book and its importance and what you're supposed to take away from it. And just, I feel like as a reader, as you're reading it, you are thinking about that in your head as you're engaging with a piece of fiction, with a piece of media, and I don't love that. I like books told in an epistolary format, and I like the mixed media found footage elements. However, this article was just way too long, and the fact that I enjoyed the voice the article was in, the narrator in that article, but I didn't need a wrap up of what this book was, because again, as I'm reading it, as anyone who is reading this book, you understand like what is happening and the social commentary and the things that we're supposed to be taking away from this, and just breaking it down I just felt like was not necessary and really dragged this otherwise very speedily paced book up. And then after that section we also got another epilogue, so this book just kept going after I thought it ended. Like the second to last part of this ended really efficiently. It did what it needed to be done. So overall I enjoyed my time with this one enough, but I think this is my least favorite Nick Cutter, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend recommend it as a starting point to his work, because at this point I feel like if this was my first book by the author, then I would not prioritize going into his backlist, which is such a bummer because I do love The Deep and The Troop. I think it's notable that honestly I did like the handyman method better than this, but I think overall this one's going to be better received. I just don't think it took any like big dares in the concept of this one. And again, just the biggest thing for me was this was overall a fun time, but I just felt like the protagonist, even if it would have been like a teen boy, I felt like it would have read a little bit more authentic. But overall, like, I didn't hate this. I just expect so much more from Nick Cutter. So overall, very middle of the road read. So let's move on. Let's have Bruce pick out book number 2. This is the second batch of 3 that Bruce is choosing from. A little bit of a different angle today because it is so rainy and stormy outside, and this is the only place that I can get a sufficient amount of light to update y'all on Bruce's second pick, which is Pink Slime. And this one is by Fernanda, Trías, and it's translated by Heather Cleary, and I've read translations from Heather Cleary before, so I know I'm in good hands. And what I've noticed from the Heather Cleary translations that I have read before, they all tend to be either gothic or very literary sort of horror, and this one is exactly that. We are following an unnamed protagonist, and we are following her as she is experiencing, along with the rest of her coastal town, sort of a contained apocalypse slash ecological disaster that is just impacting their town. It came in through the ocean. There was a very vividly red and pink algae bloom, and this algae bloom is infecting the air, making it unsafe to breathe. So when the wind blows a certain way, everyone in town is in danger of being infected. And if you breathe this air in, you contract a very serious illness, which if you breathe it in, you contract the illness, you're more than likely going to die. So while this is a post-apocalyptic story, we're really focusing on our main character and her relationships with the different people in her life. We're focusing on her and her mother, her and her ex-husband who contracted the illness and is in critical care, and then she also nannies for a young boy who has a eating disease. They don't say the name in here, but it's something to do with this child's chromosomes. He's always hungry, always eating, like he feels famished at all times. So our main character is not only dealing with her own survival, but just the relationships that she has between her and these 3 individuals. So it's very interesting, very introspective, character driven, and I'm intrigued so far. This is definitely very gothic, very literary. Honestly, this feels a lot like dreamlike in a lot of ways. The blurb for this one says, in a city ravaged by a mysterious plague, a woman tries to understand why her world is falling apart. So we're focusing on this woman and her world falling apart while the rest of the world kind of falls apart around her. So that's really interesting. I'm kind of curious to see what the next 50% is going to look like. A blurb on the back of this book from Sylvia Moreno Garcia, who is an author that I really enjoy, says it's an intimate and melancholic look at an ecologically ravaged future. And melancholic is definitely a great word to describe this one so far. Our main character is, I'm very interested in her thought processes because a lot of people at this point are leaving this town, are fleeing this town, and she keeps finding excuses and reasons to stay, even though I feel like a lot of people in her family and then you as the reader are begging her to leave. And it's interesting seeing her thought processes and the ways in which her relationships and different things are tying her down to the place where she's grown up, even when it's no longer safe to live there. This one's very short. It's only 219 pages and it's a lot smaller than the traditional hardback size, so I should be finishing this up pretty soon. This is a very interesting apocalypse book, and I'm so curious to see where the rest of the book goes from here. Okay, so I finished Pink Slime. I don't have the physical copy anymore because I did have to return it to the library, but I finished this, and this is one where I appreciate what it is doing. It's very literary, very experimental in a lot of the ways in which it is told, and I enjoyed those aspects. I appreciated those aspects, and it was very beautiful writing. I would seek out something by this author in the future, but overall, this one was a little bit of a miss for me. I just felt like the biggest nitpick that I have is that the character of Morrow, the little boy who has a chromosomal disorder that causes him to constantly be hungry, a lot of the ways in which our main protagonist and other people around him would talk about him, the language that they would use was very dehumanizing, and it didn't feel like any sort of commentary on how people in society would treat Morrow. It just kind of felt like those were just words being used to describe this little boy as very monstrous and like not human, and I didn't love that. This one's definitely very character driven, over plot driven. I know a lot of people, I feel like if I were to go and read reviews of this one, a lot of the lower reviews would probably say this was a plotless book, not a lot happened, and you know, I don't love the phrasing of that, because a lot of these plotless books, a lot of the times, not all the times, but a lot of the times, they're just character focused books and the plot is internal rather than external. But for this one, the character, like, even though it was so character driven and it's so internal, I didn't feel like our main character really progressed at all throughout the story. I felt like from the beginning to the end, if you read the first chapter and read the last chapter, our main character didn't really learn anything from her actions in the past, and she didn't decide to move in a new direction, or there wasn't a lot of character growth throughout this story, which I didn't love. Overall, this book just felt like very passive and very slow. The writing was very beautiful and I thought it was interesting at times. Now, I think maybe this could be written very intentionally, that as climate disaster is happening, people are very slow to take action. There's a lot of inaction that happens with things going on in the real world. So maybe that is a commentary, and a commentary that is very applicable to a lot of climate crises that we're facing at the moment that are just going to get worse as time goes on. So I could see maybe how that was written that way intentionally, but that doesn't mean that it made it an enjoyable story to read. So overall, you know, this is an author I definitely check out. Again, a very literary, very slow moving. The prose in this one was very beautiful, just it didn't do a lot for me by the end. But we are moving on to the final book in this vlog. Let's go see what Obi picks out. These are the last 3 set of books that Obi's choosing from. So I am now halfway through Obi's second pick, which is And Now He Shall Appear by Kate Vanderborg. And this one, funnily enough, is another book where we're following an unnamed narrator. It's definitely not a common device, so it's just funny that I'm reading 2 books back to back with that literary device. So we're following an unnamed narrator. He arrives at Cambridge. He's a little bit out of his element. He's an outsider. He does not come from money. He also comes from a very rural northern area, and that causes him to be the subject of some teasing and just being othered because he doesn't sound like his peers, his accent, and just the things he talks about, because he does not have a privileged upbringing. However, he soon becomes friends with a man named Bryn, and Bryn is the exact opposite of our narrator. Bryn comes from money. He's a legacy at Cambridge. He's just very wealthy and connected and very enigmatic as well. And these two quickly, or at least our narrator, becomes very, very obsessed with Bryn. So this is a pretty classic dark academia psychological thriller type of story. We have the ambiance of the school. We have kind of like an odd duck or outsider main character being integrated into a friend group that has significantly definitely more privilege, and there's themes of obsession, and there's also a murder. So it's pretty stereotypical when it comes to a lot of the dark academia, like the focuses and the themes. We've got the obsession, we've got the murder, we've got the obsession and romanticization of studying classics. Our main character, the narrator, is studying music and is a musician. So all of that, pretty boilerplate. I've definitely read stories like this before. This does have some interesting debates and discussions about class and privilege. If you're going to pick this up, I wouldn't recommend you reading all of The Dust Jacket because it says like who is murdered, and while that is suggested at this point in the story, it hasn't happened yet, the 50% mark. It's only been rumored, and you kind of have just started to piece together who's murdered. And I just think that while this isn't a murder mystery story, I don't think it's necessarily a big shock and reveal who is going to be the party murdered. It's just the blurb gives an awful lot for what is, while I'm reading it fast, kind of a slower paced book. It's taking its time setting up our narrator and Cambridge and getting integrated into this group of friends. So that is definitely something to note. I'll also say I don't know if our main character, if he's a reliable narrator or not. So that's very interesting. There have just been some clues and some dialogue here and there where I'm kind of questioning how reliable his story is. And also, he just doesn't seem like that great of a person. This kind of reminds me of The Great Gatsby, in which our narrator, much like Nick, like they are very obsessed with a very influential and louder than life character. However, I feel like Nick is a much more likable character than our narrator here. Our narrator here is like, I feel like he's the type of guy to complain that women never date nice guys or women never date geeky guys, and that's not the case. Maybe, you know, women aren't dating you not because of those reasons, but because maybe you're not actually that nice. He's a little bit insufferable in a different way in which the privileged rich kids that he is growing to be accustomed to and living with and surrounding himself with are insufferable. So I don't love his character, but the more that I think a lot of the things that he's saying, because we do get some snippets into the present. This is set primarily, our main character goes to college in the 2000s. So there are some interstitial moments where it is present day. He's going back to Cambridge and reminiscing about the things that happened there. So I think maybe some of the things that I just don't love about our main character could be because he has maybe not rose-colored glasses, but maybe just some nostalgic times and thinking about things, and either intentionally or unintentionally misrepresenting things that are happening in this. Overall, so far so good. Definitely like a very classic dark academia book. I'm enjoying it overall, and I will check back in later to wrap up this vlog and to give y'all my final thoughts on this one. Okay friends, so I finished And He Shall Appear, and I ended up not really loving the way that this story went, and the ending, there were a lot of aspects about the ending that are very, very spoiler filled, so I can't really talk about them at length, but I didn't really get along with this one. I did appreciate the atmosphere, and I liked how this felt very slow paced and very intricate, very much building upon dark academia themes while not feeling the need to be like a 500-page book. This is only about 320 pages, and I think that was a good length for what this was. My biggest complaints about this one is that in this point in my reading journey, this is nothing that I haven't read before. Not that every single story has to be new and shocking and full of twists and turns and just a completely different revolutionary story, but just especially with critiques that come alongside dark academia, I just didn't feel like this covered anything that hadn't already been covered by other books that I just prefer better, but that's definitely a me thing. I honestly think this is a solid dark academia, so if you are a dark academia completionist, or if you're looking for a gateway into dark academia, I think this could be a good book to check out. For me, I just felt like, especially towards the end, this either needed to lean a lot more into the paranormal or it needed to be a lot more ambiguous. I don't know how much sense that made if you haven't read this book, but if you have, maybe you understand what I'm talking about. I didn't love the main character, which is fine. Like, I can appreciate an unlikable narrator and I can appreciate a narrator that I don't like as a person, but just for me, like, the dynamics between our narrator and Bryn, I just didn't fully buy like I did for other academia books. And I never really fully bought like Bryn as this wonderful character who everyone is just so enthralled by. I didn't understand, like, obviously, you know from page one, you know from the jump that he's not going to be a wonderful human being, but usually with dark academia or any sort of book that's exploring like a very tenuous and up and down relationship, even if the person ends up being not a great person, you need to be able to buy into why people would be so attracted to them and want to be in their inner circle. I never really fully bought into the fact, like, why does everyone like Bryn so much? So there was that. I will say this is a book where I loved the fact that our narrator was unnamed. I think there's a very specific reason for that, and I appreciated that a whole lot. I think it was one of my favorite parts of this book was the fact that our narrator was unnamed, and throughout this book as a reader reflecting on why that was and how it kind of broadened the story a little bit and really added some just further things to think about. This is, I feel like, a great book club book because of the ending in particular and just different things that went on. I think there's a lot to discuss with why is there an unnamed narrator, the different relationships, and then of course the threads of magic and how magical this book is. I think those would make great discussions for a book club. So this is definitely one where for me it just fell a little flat with some of the things that I prefer in a story, but I could recommend this pretty broadly, especially for people who are looking for an intense, obsessive story. The back of this blurbs it as Saltburn meets The Secret History. Now, I need to read The Secret History. I tried such a long time ago and I DNF'd it. I would love to return to it back again, and I haven't seen Saltburn, so I have been seeing, though, from reviews of people who have read those things and loved it, really liked this book as well. So if you are intrigued by The Secret History and Saltburn comps, this could be a good book for you to check out. But that is going to be the end of this vlog. I had a fun time with this one. I definitely like doing these vlogs a couple times a year just to kind of prioritize books that maybe I wouldn't have prioritized picking up other than the fact that my dogs picked them. I would definitely say I love Obi so much, but for this vlog, Bruce won. And that is because I absolutely love My Darling Dreadful thing. The further apart that I am from having read it, just the more that I look upon it fondly, and Johanna van Veen is definitely an author that I want to follow her career trajectory because I really, really enjoyed this book. So if you take one book recommendation from this vlog, I would take Bruce's first pick, which would be My Darling Dreadful thing, but I did have a really good time with this vlog. I appreciated my dogs picking these books for me, but that's gonna be it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, leave a dog emoji down below if you made it to the end. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye!